Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. And I have to tell you something, people. If you haven't been watching the OJ documentary on ESPN, you need to go watch it. I know everything at ESPN 30 for 30 are amazing, amazing episodes. But this one, a lot of people were sitting there going, "Oh, it's too long. It's 10 hours." But I'm going to tell you something. It's been amazing. So please go watch it. And that's all I can say. And we have a great show today. Actually, we're calling back to my area. Well, I grew up in Cherry Hill. My next guest is from Marlton. He's a very, very funny comic. It's Jay Black. How you doing, Jay?
Hey there, Steve Cooper. How are you, buddy?
Good, man. It's now, how's the weather back there in Marlton? Is it nice today?
Well, it depends on your definition of nice. I mean, it's sunny and it's exceedingly hot. So, yes. I mean, from a technical point of view, I guess if you're somebody that enjoys going outside, it's an okay day. But from my point of view, it's just a day that's going to cost me electrical money.
Burbank right now, 107.
Wait, it's 107 degrees where you are?
Yes. That's why I'm inside. I have the air on. Put it this way. My girlfriend's upstairs because I said, go upstairs. I'm recording the show. And she has the air on up there, and she's like, "Can you hear the air?" I said, "I don't care if I can hear the air. It's fine." And it's true. I mean, and you know how heat rises. Even though when it's this hot, your place can be 82, and you're still fine.
Yeah. Here's what I'm going to say. In the 70s, there was all those like Time magazine articles like global cooling. It's time we're going to have the new ice age come. Of the two, I'd be so much happier with an ice age right now than what we're currently dealing with. Like, I just want the scientists to get together and go back to when it was being cold again.
Right.
Because you can always get warmer. You can't get cooler easily.
I know. It's amazing. It's the thing. So, anyway, Jay, I got to talk to you. I know you're from Marlton. Now, I know, and Brian was on just last week. Was Brian on last week? Brian was, and your buddy, Anthony Stark has been on. And,
oh, yeah, I love Anthony.
And we've talked about you, and and I got to ask you, now, you've been doing comedy for a long time, and I knew you started writing with Brian, creating at a young age.
Yeah.
But when did you decide you wanted to do comedy? And was it? It was probably before Brian. But at what point did you watch TV? Did you see a comic? Or what made you decide at a young age to get into this business?
Sure. Now, I have a story. It's a true story. That it's one of these stories that outside incidents take from a lovely story to a tragic story. Which is, I was 7 years old. I was at my house, and my dad, who was a very taciturn guy, did not show a lot of emotion. He said, "We're going to watch a movie," and the whole family gathered around, and we watched Bill Cosby himself, which is probably, arguably the best concert stand-up film of all time. I'm sure there's going to be people who said Richard Pryor on Sunset. But I go Bill Cosby himself for the best 2-hour concert stand-up film.
Okay.
And it was just mind-blowing because I had never laughed that hard in my entire life. But more than that, I had never seen my dad laugh that hard in my entire life. And I remember thinking, and this is what gets me in trouble now, because there's interviews out there that I've repeated this story a couple of times, but the line I always used to say was, "I saw what Bill Cosby was doing and said, I want to do that too." Which, take it out of context. I don't know if anybody's going to ever Google my name and Bill Cosby's name, but I've tried to find all the blogs on which that's posted and then leave a comment. At the time, I didn't know that this could mean anything except comedy and Jell-O.
Well, isn't that scary that it's come to that? Because growing up near Philadelphia, Bill Cosby was around our households, and I'm a little older. I'm 10 years older than you, I believe, and we watched the Cosby Kids, and I still have the best of Bill Cosby, the cassette that I used to drive when I go to gigs and listen to.
Yeah.
And he was in our area, especially in our area, in the South Jersey and the Philadelphia area, he was this dynamo, and that's what hits us more because it happened in our backyard.
Yeah, it's two things on that. One, it's with the Jungle Book that just came out recently. I remember reading a ton of articles online just reminding everybody, Rudyard Kipling was a colonialist, racist jerk, FYI. And question being, can you divorce a man from his work? Can you take a guy who was a colonialist, racist jerk? Sure. And he was of his time? Sure. But he also wrote a great story, so can't we just enjoy the story without having to preface it with, oh, he's a terrible racist guy as well? So now Bill Cosby, and liking Bill Cosby, has become this thing where you have to preface it with, of course I don't condone all the terrible things he was doing, but he was still probably, pound for pound, the greatest stand-up who ever lived, or at least in the conversation as such.
Right. Oh, yeah, totally. And you're right. And that's the funny thing. It's also just the way our climate has changed. Where I read an article, and you know how when you read some blogs, and it catches your eye, and someone was writing how and I'm a big John Hughes fan. I'm a kid of the '80s, man. I was in college in the '80s. But
Absolutely.
Someone's writing how 16 Candles. Oh, it's so misogynistic and sexist and racist, and I'm like, it was so damn funny. And it was. And the funny thing is, after I read this article, I posted it on Facebook, and people from my age, I'm not all my friends are intelligent, but most of them are intelligent people, all were like, this person has a stick up their ass. And it's like Cosby. We know what he did. We know this is awful. But you're right. His work, his stand-up was great. I mean, I still say to myself, buck, the buck bit and stuff like that.
Yeah, it feels like, I've often said that when it comes to when you act in public, everybody should get a I'm not a criminal card, and you get to keep that card until you do something wrong. And the second you do something wrong, they take the I'm not a criminal card away.
Right.
Just so that when you are doing something that a criminal, if they were doing it, you'd be suspicious of, but if a regular person did it, you shouldn't be suspicious of, you can just hand them the I'm not a criminal card. Like, if I wanted to buy Sudafed at a CVS, and I've never created crystal meth in my garage, I should just be allowed to get that Sudafed.
Right.
So when I go to get it, and they're like, oh boy, I don't know, you got to fill out this paperwork, and I just flash my I'm not a criminal card, I get the Sudafed, no more questions asked. I feel like there should also be an I'm not a racist, or I'm not a misogynist, or I'm not just a general jerk card, so that you can just have that, and people can assume that up until the point you do something that's actually racist or misogynistic, so that when you say something like, oh, I enjoyed that movie, The Jungle Book, I don't also have to say, and by the way, Rudyard Kipling was a colonial racist jerk, and we should not like what he did. Because, of course, we know that we shouldn't feel that way. We should just enjoy the work and divorce that from the man. So that's my feeling on the Bill Cosby of it all. But there's just a roundabout way of saying that's what got me into comedy, because I loved Bill Cosby. I wanted to do what he did comedy-wise.
Now, so this is, how old were you?
7.
Okay, so you're 7. So now what, I mean, as a 7-year-old wanting to do comedy, I mean, did you start doing talent shows, or what did you do? Because I know you ended up started writing with Brian and stuff like that, but at 7, did you sit there and say, this is what I'm definitely going to do? Did you put it in your mind, this is what my job is going to be?
No. I mean, not so far as I have a crystal clear idea how this is going to happen, and there's a plan involved. I mean, there was comedian, and there was also, a superhero and hockey player.
Right.
A bunch of stuff that seems sort of out there in the world. But it was always in my mind as the thing that was the dream. And I grew up at a time that dream was fueled all the time. I mean, I'm 7 in 1983, and now the 80s comedy boom starts, and through my childhood and adolescence, it's nothing but wall-to-wall stand-up on television. So I'm just absorbing this constantly. And, I remember my main issue being that I had tremendous stage fright. Just boiling, fearful. My friend Chris used to play piano in the band at Cherokee High School. And he could only practice on this grand piano that was on the stage at our school. And I would, he would play the grand piano, and I would just walk out to the empty audience, the on the stage, and look out at all the empty seats. And I'd imagine myself, oh, I'm a stand-up comic, and I just imagine all the applause. And then 2 seconds later, I would think, well, I'd have to say some stuff, and they'd be looking at me, and I would get stage fright from the empty auditorium, and I'd have to leave. That's how bad it was. So the actual chances of it actually happening were slim, plus the fact I lived in New Jersey, And it's not like they come trolling through the colleges of New Jersey to go, hey, you look funny, let's get you a sitcom deal. So it just sort of became a pipe dream, especially after I went to college. I got my degree in English education, and then I went on to be a teacher. So I was like, well, I'll just settle into this. I'll do this for 45 years, then I'll die with hopefully not a lot of debt.
Okay, so you sat there, even though you wanted to do comedy, you actually you said, you were so afraid, and just the stage fright, that you didn't try to venture into Philadelphia and do open mics or stuff like that. You went to college and you decided, I'm going to be a teacher. Now, what did you teach?
I taught English, secondary ed. I taught grammar and the canon, and also poetry. And I had gone to an open mic at Andy's Room, Comedy Cabaret in the Northeast Philadelphia, when I was 19, and chickened out. I didn't even put my name on the list. So that was my one encounter with it. And I was like, well, I'm never doing that again. My second year teaching, I'm teaching a poem called "The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock." I don't know if you're familiar with this song, this poem.
No.
But if you get the chance, look it up. It's one of his most famous works. The one piece that everybody seems to know from this is the "Do I dare to eat a peach" line. But essentially, it's about getting into middle age and never having done anything out of fear. And I used to, do a big to-do with the kids because it was my favorite poem. And I would have them say, what is your Prufrock moment in the outer edges of your mind? And you start to, go into that sad decline that we're all headed towards. And, as Prufrock says in the poem, I have measured out my life in coffee spoons, that it's, every morning is exactly the same. What is the thing when you are there 20 odd years from now that you will be regretful of that you never did? And that was my big project that I'd have them do. And then the little bastards turned it on me.
Okay.
And said, well, what's yours, Black? And I had to say, well, stand-up comedy. And just so they wouldn't get the better of me, that night happened to be a Wednesday, which is the night of the open mic at the Comedy Cabaret in Northeast Philly. And I knew where it was because I had driven there for 6 years earlier to chicken out. I went and I did a set that I had written that afternoon. And from there it was, as you know from doing stand-up, heroin directly into my veins.
Now, you know what's funny, though? It's that you had the stage fright, but yet you had no problem getting up and teaching in front of kids. That's what sort of amazes me because, I know stand-up, everyone goes, oh, we're afraid we're not going to be funny. Well, I substitute taught before, and you know what? Those kids can be bastards. I mean,
yeah,
let's
absolutely.
get real. I mean, and a bunch of kids on a sugar high are worse than a heckler being drunk. So I'm just surprised that you probably never correlated it, but probably it made it easier for you to get on stage because you were getting all that public speaking that people don't get.
I think you're exactly right. And I think what the difference was, I didn't have a lifelong goal to be a teacher. I had a lifelong goal to, the stand-up comedy was one thing, but, I was doing English because I like to read and write. And the teaching part was just because my father said, hey, get a teaching degree because you can't be vice president of poetry interpretation at a big company. So I sort of fell into the teaching. And I think because it wasn't a big deal in my mind and because it was like a power differential, I was the expert in this subject and the kids weren't, that it was an easier kind of public speaking than in my mind stand-up comedy was, where I had inversed the power differential. The audience had all the power, and that's what made it so scary. And I think that it was a good halfway step that allowed me to get over that initial crushing stage fright, because you're right, facing down 15 high school sophomores and teaching them about Shakespeare, far scarier than even the worst Philadelphia open mic crowd.
Yeah. So you go to the Comedy Cabaret out there on what's that, on Roosevelt Boulevard?
Roosevelt Boulevard. So you already know, classy.
Oh yeah, it's like it's K&A adjacent. So you go there, and now how do you do your first night? Are you happy with it? I mean, once you got on stage, did that fright step back into you, or did you sit there and go, "This is what I'm waiting for"? What was your reaction that first time you hit the stage?
First time I hit the stage, it was my first time I did well. I often wonder, in a different universe, had that first night gone poorly, how would it have gone? Because I did well one time in my first 9 months of stand-up, and it was that first time. And I think it had it been reversed, had it been the second time that I was destined to do well, there wouldn't have been a second time because I would have been so crushed from that first time. But I got up there, it went well, and it was that, that bolt of lightning, that first big laugh, or what seemed like a big laugh at the time. Who knows if it was actually as big as I remember. But that first big laugh hits, and it's, every single thing you've ever wanted in human interaction. Which, to those of you listening to this going, well, gee, that sounds petty. Yeah, that's true. It is very petty because comedians are petty people who don't know how to relate to people in a normal, a natural way. We relate in laughter. And that's how it felt. It felt like the first time that I was actually, I'm sure my first time having sex was probably as good, if not better, but I don't remember that as crystal clear as I remember getting up on stage the first time.
So no, you get on first stage, and you said that was one time you did good, and in 9 months you didn't do well. Where were you going in Philadelphia? Because I know when I started out, we had the Comedy Factory outlet, we had the Comedy Works, and then the Funny Bone eventually opened, but I was almost by North Jersey by then. Where were you hitting stages at? Because, there wasn't, Andy's clubs never had open mics, really. So where were you going to get on stage?
So this is where going that first time 6 years previous when I was 19 helped me, because I couldn't help but notice a lot of the same guys that I remembered from that first time going when I was 19 were still there when I actually got on stage 6 years later. So it didn't take me long to realize, oh, wait a second, this is not the methodology by which you move up in this area. You can't get better here, maybe, because I know myself well enough to know that I am going to adapt to the audience as best I can to try to make them laugh. And if it's a bunch of jaded comics watching every week, I'm going to change my set to make a bunch of jaded comics happy. So I said, I'm not going to do that. After 3 or 4 weeks of doing the open mic, I just started going to coffee houses and to little restaurants, little places that would have a place that you could perform at. And I would say, I'm a young comic, not very good, but what is your night that you don't have a lot of people at your place? And I will, go out and I'll paper the area. I'll try to get them in. I won't take anything from the door, maybe $1 or $2, just to have some value to the show that they're watching. And, we'll put on a show. And I knew the local comics at the time, so I could get, an hour's worth of stand-up from the local people in there. And, in exchange for that, I'll make sure there'll be a one-item minimum is part of the ticket.
Okay.
So you'll get something sold. And within, if I think my first show was in February, my first open mic, by the summer of that year, I had shows running Tuesday through Sunday. We had 6 days worth of shows.
Who were some of the comics back then?
Guys like Steve Reese, Mike. Now, these are guys who are my class, like right.
Because I'm friends with Reese. I'm friends with Reese on Facebook, but I don't know him.
Let's see. He had a friend named Pat who was also called Pork Chop, but I can't remember his last name. He called himself Pork Chop. Mike Rainey was part of that group. Chip Chantry, who's doing very well for himself, also a teacher, part of that group. A guy named Jim Johnson, who I thought was the one who was going to be the big star out of our group, but he dropped out after a couple of years and now works in Philly in PR, so, it's very similar to stand-up. And Vinny Nardiello, who was my good friend from North Jersey. We went to college together, and he went to the open mic the second week with me because he said, he was not going to allow me to do stand-up without him, and he was my partner in putting together all these shows around Philadelphia.
So you're getting these shows going. So you're getting stage time. Do you feel yourself getting better? Are you getting better?
Yes. I pretty much insist on emceeing all these shows because I realize that that's the way I'm going to get the chops, because that's the hardest position. You're up first. It hurts. You're trying to get them all focused, and that way I didn't have to put the comics that I was hiring, and I say hiring I'd share the door with them, whatever that would be, like $25, $30. and I could put them in a better position, which meant that I could trade stage time with them. So yeah, I'm getting better along this way, but I never have that show that pops the same way that that first show at that first open mic pops, at least in my mind at that time.
So you do this for how long do you do this for?
So by the end of that summer, so whatever that was, 10 weeks of the summer, I do shows that entire time. And one by one, the venues drop off because it's too much of a pain in the butt, or somebody said, that it was a PG-13 show, to which somebody thought that meant you could say the C word repeatedly.
Right.
And it disappears. By the end of that summer, which is, August, September of 2002, I go back to the Comedy Cabaret open mic, and it's my first time back in 8 months or whatever. And I had been doing these MC sets where I was doing 20, 30 minutes throughout the course of the night MCing, and I take all that and I distill it down to my 5-minute open mic set. And that is the first time that I can say that I felt like I killed. I'm sure if I were to listen to the tape of it, I was not killing. But it just so happened that John Kensel was there that night. I'm sure you know John Kensel.
Oh, yeah.
And the Philadelphia area.
Of course.
And he was friends with Andy and said, gee, that was really good. We got to get you, a regular spot at a regular show. He calls Andy, and I start working the Comedy Cabaret circuit, in guest spot position, but in front of regular paying audience that came for comedy and valued what they were seeing, so that I got exactly what my goal was, which was in front of real people.
Right.
That's what I wanted, because I knew real people would make me write comedy for an actual audience and not that sort of arch hipster kind of BS-y kind of comedy that you do for other comics.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what's amazing about Andy, and it was his clubs are around for a long time, so his people knew what comedy was. They were smart. I remember when I started out, and I was doing comedy for a little bit, and he used to book a room in State College called Champs, and it was like a 3-hour ride. And I get a call. I didn't really know Andy. I was new, and he goes, "Hey, this guy Grover Silcox," and I worked the door at the Comedy Factory outlet. Said he wants, I told him to bring it over. He wants to take you, and I was like, "All right." I pay like $150, and I'm like, "Woohoo!" I'm a comic.
I'm rich.
And I drove with the Grover, and we went, and I had a good set, but it was a bar. But that's the thing with Andy. After that, he called me and said, "I got great reports on you." He goes, "I heard you're a good MC. Do you want to, I want to book you." And I was like, all right. And I feel like I'd booked at Mitchell's and Comedy Factory Outlet. And he went through, and that's when he had like 8 clubs. And he went through my calendar, and he gave me 35 weeks. And I was I was like, whoa. And it was MC, but just same thing. They were real crowds, and it wasn't, the people came out to watch comedy.
And it's just like anything else, it's reps. It's getting those reps in front of people. And, getting good enough so that you can actually get the reps is actually, that bootstrapping is almost the hardest part, because it's, how do I get the experience if I can't get on stage? But I can't get on stage until at least I'm a little experienced. But Adam Carolla has a great riff about restaurants, which are that restaurants are so difficult to keep afloat. You don't have to ask if they're doing okay. All you have to ask is if it's still there.
Right.
Because if it's still there, it's doing okay. Same thing with helicopter pilots. I'm told that 99.9% of all helicopter crashes are due to pilot error. So the way you identify a good helicopter pilot is if he's still alive. So if he's still alive and a helicopter pilot, he probably is okay. Versus, I think the same thing is true with comedy. If you are getting on stage, it probably means that you are good enough to be on stage. And it's the only way that you can continue to improve and get better is to continue to get those reps on stage. So if you're still being booked, you're doing okay.
So now, so you started doing the guest spots. Now did Andy start booking you?
Yeah. So after a while, he starts booking me. Steve Bix. I don't know if you ever worked with Bix back in the day.
Steve Bix.
Steve Everybody does a Jeff. It is me, Steve Bix.
I remember. So Steve Bix was booking.
Steve Bix was booking VFW halls and Eagles Aries and Moose Lodges all around Pennsylvania. Stuff that I now know is tremendously hell gigs.
Right.
places where you'd walk in and they'd start making fun of you as you were walking in, like, this guy thinks he's funny. But things that, they give you those calluses on your hands that you need to play the guitar. That you go in there and you eat shit in front of them. And by the way, is this a explicit podcast? Can I say that?
Well, you can say whatever you want. It goes to a bunch of internet radio stations where you can say whatever you want.
Oh, okay. So long and short of it is, you go and you do these things, and they're tremendously difficult. But you're getting $50, and you're showing up, and you're getting to do stand-up, and you're getting paid. Because Steve was still working Andy's rooms from time to time. That's where he saw me. And, I started to expand outward. I started to MC for Steve, and Steve at that time had a ton of work, not desirable work, but a ton of work, that I was responsible because, I had a regular job. I wasn't like a comic that was like, hey, I might be there, I might not. It depends on if my dealer is available that morning. Right. I would show up on time. So, Steve would gave me his lights and backdrop and said, you got to get there an hour early and set this up. That year, after my first year with Steve, I think I did something like 45 dates with him the following year. I mean, I was working just about every weekend at a different Moose Lodge in and around Pennsylvania.
Were you working for the Pickle Man?
Well, see, no, because I fell in with Steve. If you worked with Steve, you could not work with the Pickle Man. There was a booking wall between the two of them. You could not. It was one or the other, Jay. You must make your decision.
Oh, God, that's so funny.
I chose Steve.
So you went to Bixby. Well, it's true, because I remember, the Pickle Man used to have these gigs, he'd ride out in his tricycle with a wig on, and then, but he had damn good pickles. Those things were good-ass pickles.
When you're talking about a comic, and the third thing you say about him is he had damn good pickles, probably says all you need to know.
Well, he wasn't a comic. He was a booker. Let's be honest. He was a booker.
Yeah.
But
good point.
So you're working for Steve. Now, do you feel like your act's growing? I know you're constantly writing, and you feel like you're advancing.
Yeah. It really is. I call it my Beatles and Hamburg time, because I made a decision early on. I had just actually read the Beatles biography about them playing this port city in Hamburg, leaving as just another Liverpudlian skiffle band and coming back the Beatles, because they never just treated it like a time-wasting gig. And I saw a lot of guys that I was working with, and at this time I had been traveling with Steve. I started getting work as a feature for the Comedy Zone. I don't know if you've ever worked at the Comedy Zone.
Actually, it's funny. Years ago, I was working for the Fletchers and some people like that as a feature, and I sent the Comedy Zone a tape. That's how long ago it was, a VHS tape.
Yeah.
And they said, we like your stuff, but you're too much of a New York style act. We could host you. And I'm like, I'm not driving down south to host. So.
Yeah. I only ever got in with them, and I got in with them earlier than I should have, because they had somebody fall out last minute on a Friday afternoon, and I guess they were just going down their list, and I was the first person who picked up and said, yeah, I can make that. And I just barely made it because it was in, I think West Virginia, and I was coming from South Jersey. But once I did well there, I got into their circuit. But you would play these places, and you would see guys that you would go, well, there's a guy who is going to be here for a short period of time and then move on to something else. And here's a guy who's a lifer. And on my second Comedy Zone gig, which for those of you listening who don't understand comedy, Comedy Zone is a regional booker for the southeast of America, and they would do these one-nighters. They have a couple of clubs that are really nice clubs, but a lot of times it was just a one-nighter in a bar in Indiana or a one-nighter in a bar in West Virginia, and you'd go in, and it wasn't a comedy space. It was a set of lights in a bar. And I was working with this guy who said, you're going to want to chase the laugh in this room, but the laugh is crack. It's addictive, and it's going to kill you. And I didn't quite put together what that meant at the time, but I realize now what he was saying was, don't be one of these guys who does an entire set built around their drunk driving funny T-shirt. And you're trying to sell the T-shirt because this is how you make your money. No, I mean, you got to make your money how you're going to make your money. But don't be the guy who gives up the idea of doing other things to chase the laugh in these rooms. And I tried my hardest to do both. I still wanted to get the laugh, but I wanted to write material that would get a laugh with them, but would also get a laugh in a club in New York with just as much ease. The things that my heroes would do, which is have these stories that were universal but unique and personal to them at the same time. So I did my best to just remind myself on every trip down to, Macon, Georgia for the week. Keep in mind, Jay, this is the Beatles in Hamburg to the best of your ability.
Right. So now you're hitting the road, you're getting the featuring, and now how do you start elevating yourself up to headliner?
So what happens is two things. One, I work with this guy named Richie Byrne. I don't know if you know Richie. He's out of New York. He's the warm-up guy for Dr. Oz now.
Okay, I remember the name.
And I like to think that all the problems that Dr. Oz has is due to Richie giving him advice. That's my theory. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I like to think is happening. Dr. Oz, you should talk about GMOs. In any event, though, he sees me at a club, Stitches in Lancaster, or I guess the Villa East at the time, and goes, "You're a really good kid. I'm going to take you with me." So he brings me on the road to feature for him for a year, and he becomes my mentor, and he's just an awesome dude. His manager sees me and takes me on, to be one of her clients as well. This lets me get seen by a college agent, and the college agent goes, "Well, I think you'd be perfect for the college market." He takes me to a college conference. Now, for those of your listeners who don't know, a college, even when you're an unknown, can pay you what 3 or 4 weeks of featuring pays you. So I go to one of these college conferences. I just happen to have a set. I think partly because I'm a teacher and I know how to talk to college kids in a way where I'm making them laugh, but I'm not trying to ingratiate myself to them.
Right.
Because that's a really hard thing to play, and they can smell that BS real fast. They can smell the guy who, dyes his hair jet black and comes out on a skateboard and goes, "Hey, I'm just like you guys." It's like, you're 48. I don't think you're just like us. But I feel like I can be apart from them, but also understand them at the same time. It goes really well, and I wind up booking like 60 colleges. And when I look at the schedule, two things become clear. I'm not going to be able to continue teaching if I take all these colleges. And it really doesn't matter because this 1 year of colleges is going to pay me twice what 2 years of teaching would have done. I can just bank all that money, and if it doesn't work out, I'll go back to teaching, or I'll try to find something else. But this is the buffer, the gift from the comedy gods, where I can actually go and do this for a year and see what works. And what happens is you go to these colleges, you're doing an hour plus by yourself. And when you feature, you do 20, 25 minutes. Here I am doing an hour at these colleges. And what I do is I'm like, I need an open mic, but you can't get an open mic when you're headlining at a college. So I would do all of the time that I had, which was 45 minutes. And then I put a Q&A in at the end. And soon enough, I was getting the same questions over and over again. And I could write around what I knew those questions would be. And if I got a question that threw me, I could just improv something, and I would just write down afterwards, and I would say, okay, well, this is my open mic. I know I can do another 15 minutes and try material out. Where they're not thinking it's a prepped show, it allows me to create material while still at a college conference or at a college, the same way I would at an open mic, and that lets me expand out to, I start the college that year with 45 minutes barely. I come back at the end of my 60 colleges with 90 minutes of material. And then I had a summer of all those feature gigs booked. And all those feature gigs booked, I'm now doing 20 and, or 25. And, if you're cutting from 90 to 20 or 25, it's going to be tight. And if it's not, get out of comedy because, you don't know what you're doing. And that was the summer that every single place that I was playing regularly just went, oh yeah, we gotta headline you.
So you start headlining then?
Yes.
And so you're what year was this?
This was summer of 2007.
Okay, so you start headlining and then you go back to do the colleges.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know you've been nominated or named College Performer of the Year.
Yep.
4 times? 3 times?
3 times.
Now
I've been College Comic of the Year 3 times, and I've been College Overall Performer of the Year 1 time.
Now, do you get a plaque, or what do you get with that?
Yeah, I get a nice little plaque. It's funny. I have my 3 plaques in my room, and then my son has one in his room because I brought my son down to accept the award with me, and he just assumed it was his award.
Okay.
And it was funny because he inherited his daddy's narcissism, in the sense that I'm like, Keen, what do you think you did to get this? And he was like, I don't know, but they're giving it to me. I'm like, okay, there you go.
There you go.
Just totally accepted it. Of course I deserve this. So he's got one of them in his room.
So now, as you're doing the comedy, when I mean, I know you started writing with Brian at a young age, but when did you and Brian Herslinger sit there and start working on screenplays and thinking that this can work? We have a future in this, and also, you know, unlike most comics and writers that leave, you've stayed in New Jersey.
Yes. So I was still teaching. It was my last year teaching. I go out to visit Brian, and he had just done My Date with Drew. And My Date with Drew had broken very big for him, and he's getting a lot of attention. And while he's trying to get various projects related to My Date with Drew off the ground, they're also asking him for follow-up. And, you know, I just go out to do a visit with him. We're taking a walk together in the morning, and he's telling me about a screenplay idea that he has, and I just fall right back into what we did when we were kids, which is go, well, that's a dumb idea. This is what I would do. And by the end of that walk, he goes, well, do you want to write this with me? And I say, sure. And we write it, and it is the most abysmal piece of shit that has ever been written. You know, it's a screenplay. Neither of us know how to say no to each other, so every idea goes in. And instead of being, you know, 90 solid pages of funny, it's 160 pages of sprawling bullshit. And we both agree maybe this is good to put in a bin and not ever look at it again. But we don't want to give up, and we write a second script. And by this time, I think a little bit of that like urgency for Brian to get a follow-up has dissipated, which may be not great for him at that moment, but was great for us as writers, because we just basically said, forget trying to please everybody. Let's just write a script that makes us laugh and see what happens. So we write this script called Three for the Road, and everything that we got in screenwriting, I think, comes from this particular script. It's just, we would get calls from executives going, this is the funniest thing that I've ever read. And in my head, I'm from New Jersey, I'm assuming, oh, well, gee, you're going to make the movie then. And they go, oh, no. I showed it to my boss. They hated it. They thought it was the most offensive thing they ever read. They didn't understand it. They don't even want to meet with you. But I think it's hilarious. So nothing really happens with that script. A couple of times it almost goes. There was a time in like 2009 or 2010, Brian would know better than me, where, you know, we had Dane Cook and Luke Wilson and Heather Graham attached for the three leads, and we had $10 million coming to us from these two producers, and we actually had a meeting at CAA where everybody was on board, everybody nods their heads, everybody goes, we're making this movie, and then the producers disappear and never show up again with the money. You know, as I'm sure you've heard countless times in talking to showbiz people, where folks at home, if you want to be a producer, this is how you do it. You ready? Hey, I'm a producer. Now you're a producer. You don't actually have to produce anything. It's the weirdest thing.
It's amazing. Nope. I wrote a screenplay when I first moved out here, and it was off someone's story. Same thing. The producers, it's like, I'm like, they didn't even understand. I made a joke about a short bus that went in the script. Well, what's that? What's that? I'm like, well, you're writing about, you know, and they're like, I don't understand. Maybe we should take it out. People won't get it. I'm like, how are you a producer? Like, shouldn't you know the project you're producing and maybe do a little research? But you're right, and I've heard that so many times. People, you promise the money, got the money, and then where's the money? And like anything, you know, you guys were young writers. You're excited. You're thinking, oh my God! Luckily for like you were doing stand up.
Yes.
And so you know, you had some money coming in, but a lot of people here don't have any money coming in, and they get this idea, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to quit my day job. You know what I mean? And it just changes.
It is the closest I imagine to what it feels like being a woman who dated Don Draper.
Yes.
You know, just you get all these promises, you get all these things in your head, and then you just wake up to this, you know, drunken guy who is not going to do anything with you. And that's what it feels like. It's just, you're just screwed over. And that's what happened with Three for the Road. It got, like I said, to the point where we had Dane Cook's agent signed off on it. Luke Wilson, which at the time Luke Wilson was a big get, so was Dane Cook, so was Heather Graham, and everything falls apart when the money doesn't show up. But that script is such a success. And Brian, you know Brian, You've met him. He is, for everything that I am not, he is when it comes to dealing with people. He is just the most gregarious, nicest, just good human being that exists in this world. I am a troglodyte. I am a troll that likes to stay inside. So our partnership has worked where he will do all of the groundwork in Los Angeles because he lives out there. He'll do all the meeting and greeting and handshaking and all that. And, I'll stay back and try to do most of the heavy lifting on the actual writing. We do all the plotting together. I do the first draft, and then Brian comes in and changes everything that he wants to change in the second draft. But that production of the first draft usually falls on me, which it's still a 50-50 partnership, but we offset to what works best for our particular talents. He's a guy that is really, really good in a room, really, really good at pitching, letting people know what the project is about. And, of course, he's directing it, so he understands it inside and out. And I'm just a funny person who should not be let out of the house. So I'll do the funny part inside with the script.
Now, when you do the funny parts, when you write the funny parts, do you draw any of that from your stand-up act? Is there anything that, because if you watch old Woody Allen, if you listen to old Woody Allen stand-up, and then you watch, Take the Money and Run, there's jokes from his stand-up in that. Adam McKay, same thing, when he did comedy in Philly, Adam used to say, oh, it's go time, or, it's the gun show, and then years later it shows up in Anchorman. Do you have any, when you guys are writing, because you were writing with a partner too, it's just not your script, would you pull anything from your stand-up act and put that in?
Very rarely would I pull actual lines from my stand-up act. What was more of what was happening, and what continues to happen, is if I'm in a writing phase where I'm trying to get writing on the writing on the script done, it's like more like in a sci-fi movie where the machine turns on and draws more and more power from the main reactor. So when the script machine is on, I don't have much writing energy for stand-up. So it's not like I'm drawing from stand-up, I'm just drawing attention away from stand-up. So if I'm writing a script for 3 or 4 months, there's a pretty good chance that there won't be any new jokes in the stand-up act in those 3 or 4 months, because you get done the script and you're like, all right, well, let me write a joke about my penis now. And you're just like, I don't have the energy for it. I'm just gonna go do what I know works.
Now, where do you pull from for your stand-up act, for your writing? I mean, I know the script doesn't say a script, you have a story. You can pull from that, you guys collaborate. Your act, and where do you pull from, and has it changed over the years?
It's changed, I think, because it draws from what is immediately annoying me at any given moment. And that started, it was, being a teacher and having a fiance, and then it became having a wife, and then it became having a wife and kid, and then it became having a wife and kids. So yeah, anything that is under my skin, my wife will always go to me, why do you complain so much? You're such a miserable person. And I'll say, well, I am, but that keeps the bills on. It keeps the bills paid and the lights on. Because I have to get annoyed first. It's like I'm a clam. It's the sand needs to turn into a pearl. So I get annoyed. I get frustrated. I can't enjoy myself anywhere. I have anhedonia. Speaking of Woody Allen, the original name of Annie Hall was anhedonia. Inability to be happy. But that turns into my personal annoyance if something turns into a joke. Like I'm working on something. I was at a hotel, and I was trying to get the soda out of the vending machine, and it of course didn't work, and I went to the front desk, and of course it's the same thing that you hear everywhere, which is, we have no responsibility for those vending machines. They're here from an outside vendor. And we've heard this a million times. So I'm working on a monumental bit about how this is like hiring mercenaries to do your dirty work, and it should not be allowed. But that right there, that moment will turn into a piece of comedy. So it's, I would say, observational in the old school sense of like Seinfeld or whatever, but with a more angry, pressing need to get people to understand what's upsetting me.
No. As you get older, and you said you have 3 kids, how is it for you to relate to college? And I want to ask you this because you've been doing colleges since what, 2007, 2008?
2006 would probably be my first colleges, yeah.
So we're looking at, you've been doing colleges for 10 years, and you work a lot. You're not like someone who goes, I'm doing a college, you do a 5-minute guest set. You're doing these sets, and and our whole political and PC climate has changed. And, the whole thing is, so as a comic, as you've developed through these 10 years, and going from now a father of 3, a homeowner in Marlton, New Jersey, upstanding pillar of society, whatever, you've probably gone to PTA meetings. I mean, you guys are basically, you're what I would call, when I grew up, a typical Cherry Hill family. Marlton. So,
white bread. We're white bread.
Yeah. So how does that work? How have you seen it change your act and in relating to the kids? Because it does seem, I don't really perform much anymore, but I was joking around. I did a set. I stopped by this place and did a set the other night, and it was this kid's 22nd birthday, and he had an ugly haircut, and I called him, I don't know, a Art Garfunkel Chia Pet, and he got like all offended, or I called him a hipster or something. But how have you noticed how it's changed?
So I would say 2 things there. One, I think that my success at the colleges, if you go to a college conference and you watch the acts that get chosen, there are acts that are cool, and this is not an indictment of those acts, because I would love to be cool, but they're guys that are all current of the moment. They are filled with the zeitgeist. They have the right genes both on them and in them, and they get chosen because it's like, oh, this guy talks directly to me. He gets me. And they don't tend to stick around for 10 years because you can only be of the moment for the moment. And then there's always going to be somebody else that comes along. And when somebody goes, oh, you've been doing colleges for a long time, I think they immediately think of that first guy. I was never that guy. I was talking about, being a teacher. And then, my wife was pregnant with my first child when I was doing that first tour. I was talking about like the impending fatherhood from the very beginning, consciously, because I knew I wasn't going to be cool. And if I tried to be cool, they would know that. And they would eat me alive because they would smell that BS. I was just being who I was. And, I've had many agents say, don't talk about that stuff. Just, say fiance, don't say wife. Don't say kids, say nephew. And I go, yeah, but they know that I'm older. And they know what children are. It's not like they just go, oh, I had no idea what the little people were for. They've seen kids before. They will laugh at this stuff. They won't think I'm cool, and maybe that will eliminate certain schools for me. But they will laugh, because I laughed at Bill Cosby at 7. I laughed at Richard Jeni when I was 13. I laughed at Seinfeld when I was 18. You're going to find these guys that make you laugh regardless of your age. So I've always strove to be those guys to the best I can. But the second part about the colleges and how they've changed, it is a much more PC atmosphere, and PC in a way that is a different kind of PC than the 90s, where it wasn't just about the language you were using. Now it's about recognizing all of these subtleties of the interactions that you have with people, that especially as a white cis male, like I am, that I don't think of. Things like privilege and, both gender and race. And rather than resist it, I've tried to embrace it. And by that I mean I've tried to understand where they're coming from without immediately say, well, you're dumb. This is dumb that you feel this way. Just get over it. This is dumb. Because some of it is dumb. And I think that even people who are really in that world will admit that some of it's dumb. But, I heard a really interesting interview with, what's his name? The guy who did Triumph the Insult Comedy Dog.
Robert Schmeigel.
Robert Schmeigel was talking about the famous Triumph goes to the line for Attack of the Clones and makes fun of everybody. And he, without breaking it down, you can get it. It's the Bill Simmons interview with Robert Schmeigel. Robert Schmeigel goes, we had 2 cuts. One in which somebody used the F word, not F-U-C-K, but the F word for a gay person, and one without. And we didn't think, our generation, Conan and me, it didn't even occur to us that the F word would be a problem. And one of the interns said, it's a problem. You shouldn't have that in there. That's a very offensive term. And he said, I could have resisted, but if I had resisted, that thing would not exist right now in the internet or in our collective memory the way it does. Because you'd watch it and you go, oh, problematic, and you turn it off.
Okay.
So his response was, rather than yell at these kids for being dumb, I try to listen to them and take, oh, that's an offensive word to you. I didn't realize that. I'm either going to embrace it and not use that word, or I'm going to have a conversation about it in my act to try to find where the middle ground on it is. You know, like Louis C.K. does brilliantly in the episode of Louis with Rich Crome. I don't know if you know Rich.
I know who he is.
Yeah, he's a gay comic, and they have a discussion about the F word. But I think being aware of the zeitgeist is very important. And even if you disagree, learning about where they're coming from so that you can push back intelligently or agree with them when it's warranted, I think is very important.
So you're doing stand-up and you're doing the writing, and now I heard did you act in the Valentine movie, or are you acting in a Christmas movie?
So I acted in Meet My Valentine. I think I was like the fifth or sixth lead, and I'm Christmas movie that's going to come out. I'm on the fourth lead on that. So each movie I move up one or two levels. So by the third movie, it'll be, the fourth or fifth movie, it'll be Jay Black in a Jay Black story.
Did you want to act, or is it just something that you had the opportunity? So you said you could act, or was it something that Brian said, hey, you might be good for this role?
It was a combination of all three. It was I never really had an urge to act, but the problem is with stand-up is, actually Sinbad said this to me. This is my name drop. I was opening for Sinbad, and he pulled me aside. And by the way, I don't know if you've ever worked with Sinbad. Monster act.
Oh, Rich Scheidner told me what a beast. Like, he opened for Rich years ago, and Rich Scheidner tells a story what a beast he is.
I know he gets a lot of crap. He shouldn't. The man's a phenomenal comic. Go see him. But Sinbad, I'm opening for Sinbad, and I'm doing my 20. And this is I headline most places, but for celebrities, I split the week. I do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday, and then Friday, Saturday I open for the celebrity. But Sinbad goes, you are in a very precarious situation because you are too funny to open for celebrities. And not me, because Sinbad goes, not me, because I'm the best there is. And I'm like, I can't argue with that. You followed, no problem. But there's a lot of guys who are not full-time stand-ups anymore. They're just celebrities who used to do stand-up who, when they travel, don't want to follow 30 minutes of a guy killing. So you're not going to get into those rooms that you desperately want to get into that are the A-room circuit, where you can make a very good living and not do colleges or not do corporate. You can actually just do these funny bones and improvs and do okay. So you're not going to get into those rooms because you're not famous enough to get in there, but you're not going to get in as a middle because the celebrities don't want you in there. So you're screwed. And, him saying that to me was like, well, that's a wake-up call. I got to find a way around that. How do I get around doing that, living in New Jersey with my wife and kids and not living in Los Angeles or New York to get famous? And it just occurred to me while I'm writing these movies, I should probably always write myself a part. And then if the movie gets made, I can be in it, and it will just be ancillary to my stand-up. It'll just be helpful in getting noticed at the A clubs for them to go, oh, well, this guy might be a big enough name that we can bring him in. So it was more about the stand-up than anything else. But once I started acting, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time with it. But, as I said, I just went into an audition. It was actually my first audition ever for, outside work. And the woman was like, you have a passion for acting. And I was like, let me put it this way. Acting is like regular cocaine, where stand-up is like really good crack cocaine. It's like CIA level, 1981 crack cocaine. So it's always about the stand-up, but I'm enjoying the acting as well.
So what was your audition for?
It was a general audition for, I don't want to give too much of the detail away. It's for a big company that is one of the places on television that has three letters in its name, that is looking, now that pilot season is over, they're looking for next pilot season and different types of actors. So they do a general and bring you in and just sort of have you read a couple of pages and go like, well, what is your type going to be? And is this a type that we should think of moving forward? So
Now, if something that happened, would you move to LA?
what I would probably do is see how long the commitment is. If it's half a year, then yeah, I'd probably have to move to LA and bring my family, or figure out something with frequent flyer miles. But if it's a commitment of like 2 months, I'd probably just come out for 2 months and then go back to my regular life when I wasn't filming.
I did it for 2 years. I would come back to go when I met you at Marlton, because I wasn't back east for ages, and my girlfriend lived back there. She lives now here with me after doing that for 2 years. It gets pretty easy. You'd be surprised. You think it's going to be hard, but it's the flight out there from LA to Jersey that sucks, because you have to add all that time. But when you're flying back, it's great. Like when you leave, and then all of a sudden you get off, and it's only an hour difference, and you go, hey, this is okay.
Yeah, I would like to think that, just like anything else, the entertainment, Steve, the entertainment industry, I'm a guy that won't even take mail to my neighbors that were delivered here by accident because I'm too lazy. But if somebody said, oh, there's a one-nighter in Maine that really wants you on a Tuesday, I'm like, I'm in the car now. I'll be there at any time. So yeah, the travel I don't think would be as problematic as it builds into my head, because once you're in the thick of it, you're just trying to get it done and see your family as much as possible when you're not performing. So we'll see. I mean, the audition went very well until I spilled my soda all over the couch. So I had to clean it up, but I did have a good line. I said, when I thought that I would be staining the casting couch today, I didn't think it'd be this way. And everyone laughed. So I immediately left on that line saying, I can't top that, so I might as well get out on that.
We just have a few minutes left. I got a quick question for you. I went to your website, which your website is jblackcomedy.com.
Yes.
And your Twitter is?
jblackcomedy on Twitter.
Okay. And so now you're doing a lot of stuff at Rowan State?
Yes, Rowan University, or the old Glassboro State in Glassboro, New Jersey.
But you're booked there like once every week.
Yeah, so I'm doing their freshman orientation, and they have about 3,000 kids that are freshmen at the college. But instead of bringing them all in at once, they do 10 separate freshman orientations of 300 or so a pop. And I am the entertainer for all 10.
That's pretty good. That must be fun.
Oh, it's great. It's great. The only thing that is bad is the kids who are the upperclassmen who help out with the freshman orientation, because they have to see my show 10 times. So they get to be like servers at a club where they're like rolling their eyes and like, mouthing along with me. And that kind of you get in your head of like, I know I'm not pleasing you right now. I'm so sorry. But I can't write a new hour, in over the course of 1 week as I'm doing all these shows. So, that's the only bad part, is they get to intimately familiar with your act. And
at your website, it has all your dates. I know you have Vegas coming up, Reno, and Arizona. So, now, do you tweet a lot before we go? Do you tweet a lot?
I went through a period where I was tweeting 10 times a day, and I was in my head about it. I don't know if you get in your head about it, where you're like looking at your follower list and you tweet something and like lose 6 followers, and you're like, what upset them? I got to track them down and find out. And then I realized, what am I doing? How is this helpful to anybody? So I took like a Twitter fast of about a month, and now I'm back on, and I'm just trying to limit myself to 1 or 2 a day and not get sucked back into the whirlpool of Twitter.
Cool, man. Well, hey, I want to thank you. I'm glad we could do this, because I'm glad I record out at home now, so it's a lot easier. And I wanted to talk to you. So I want to thank you for coming on.
I want to thank you for having me and then asking me lots of questions about myself and feeding my narcissism.
So people, go to J Black Comedy. Also, go to my website, coopertalk.net. Coopertalk.net. I have over 520 episodes up there.
Awesome.
Raphael Zabarge will be being posted soon, and Liz Gillis from Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll, and Victorious will be posted. Also, follow me on Twitter. It's at Cooper Talk. Email me, Cooper@coopertalk.net. Instagram and Words with Friends, Cooper Talk 1. I like Words with Friends. I'm okay. I'm not great. I'm not bad. I'm okay. And also, don't forget my other website, stopthesalt.com. It's my low-sodium cookbook for 120 easy recipes. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Amazon.com, both of those .coms. But get it from me, because I make more money, and I'll sign it for you. And, you want to start eating healthy because you want to live. You don't want to go through health problems. So, people, please follow at JBlackComedy. Go to jblackcomedy.com. CooperTalk.net. Email me, Cooper, at CooperTalk.net. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I will talk to you guys next week. There we